Hello and a very, very good morning, everyone. Over the past couple of years, we've brought to you numerous sessions pertaining to different facets of the air cargo business. But then, just like every time, we stumble upon something new and realize we have barely scratched the surface. I am Kadri Rana from Logistics Insider, and I am delighted to have with me a very special guest today for an exclusive thought leadership interaction on some of the very, very critical aspects of the air cargo industry that have not been, brought in front of you or, being discussed in the mainstream. So, as we all know, the air cargo industry, which quickly became the lifeline of the pandemic, is now staring at a very, very turbulent circumstance considering the geopolitical scenarios that have been happening around the world, and they're clearly messing the demand and supply balance. Now, the air cargo industry, in order to maintain the supremacy, is looking to ensure competitive pricing and reliable service, and it's a burden which is typically borne by GSAs. So, GSAs, or the General Sales Agent, are no more just a marketing arm of the airline, but they're now contributing to airlines' sales, their profitability by expanding operating networks, helping cut operating costs to reduce prices, getting more involved in data capturing, managing the ground handling and surface distribution, and the list just goes on. So, as these changing times make the air cargo industry more challenging in terms of competition, service, global reach, bringing in constant evolution to the job of GSAs, Logistics Insider and Allied Aviation has teamed up to bring you a super insightful and riveting interaction with Kritika Seth, who is the Executive Director at Allied Aviation Private Limited, which is one of the most renowned GSAs in the country with a pan-India presence. Welcome to the show, Kritika. It's been an absolute delight to be here with you today.
Thank you, Karvi. Likewise, I'm super excited to be here.
Well, we are really excited to take this conversation forward. This interaction is going to dwell upon some of the pertinent subjects like demand and supply, as well as capacity and revenue, amongst others. But before we actually begin with it, I would like to get a little personal and just sit back and enjoy your journey of how did you came into the profession, into the air cargo industry. Why did you opt for it? And given the fact it is preconceived as a male dominant segment, so having a woman in the industry is actually amusing to, I think, a lot of us. So let's start by hearing your story, Kritika.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Like I said, my journey started in 2015, where I was working in the United Nations prior to my stint at Allied. And I worked there for 2 years. I was a part of a committee known as Global Action to Prevent War, where we used to advise missions on nuclear disarmament policy. So that is what I was doing for 2 years. And then from there, due to circumstances, I had to return home. When I came home, I had the privilege of joining my father, who has been the chairman of Allied and has been in the industry for 40 years. So I had the privilege of shadowing him for a year as a business development manager. That was my position when I started in 2015. And shadowing him kind of was very natural, because we've heard words of MAA, CCU. We've learned these 3-letter codes as a child. So even if you look at my phone now or previously before I joined the air cargo industry, any chacha, mama, or any aunt or uncle was always saved as CCU, MAA, DEL, BOM. So it was very natural for me to be a part of the air cargo industry, because the lingo was something I had heard since I was a child. Both my brother and I have been a part of the business for the last 8 years now. We both share the designation of an executive director. I'm currently taking care of the business development and the marketing of the entire group right now. And my brother Kabir handles the overall macro activities of the group as an executive director. So it's been a privilege working with dad especially, and my uncles also have been a part of the business. So while I do know it has been a male-dominated industry, I have had the privilege of having this red carpet rolled in front of me, with these really steady pillars of this industry, and having them walk me through this industry. So very mindful of this privilege, very grateful of it, but at the same time, I know what it feels like to be 1 in 10 women when it's a pool of 100 men. So I know that feeling as well. But really, it's this industry is so global. It's so vast. It's so wide, that even if I left the United Nations, I joined this industry, I don't feel isolated at all, because every small incident that happens in other small parts of the world affects our industry. So this overall ecosystem really fascinates me. This chain really fascinates me, and that's what's been keeping me here for the last 8 years.
Well, it's great to hear about your journey so far, and we hope you have an amazing journey ahead also. You were also backstage when we were conversing about it. You were talking about how the industry has become more difficult, to deal with, considering how everything impacts everything in the industry that's happening. And you were talking about if you would want to bring your children to the industry. Now, I'm looking for a more towards it, like a yes answer, because I'm trying to, bring more people into the industry. But we can be honest, and you can share your opinion if you would, actually want your kids to deal with all the challenges and the difficulties that the industry actually throws at you.
What this industry gives you an adrenaline. There is a reason why I see people in their 70s and 80s still a part of this industry, because you get addicted to the adrenaline and the dynamism, the volatility of this business, and you cannot get adjusted in any other business, because this business gives you that rush of dopamine, which no other business gives you, because every new day is a new problem, and you have to
True.
keep working on your problem solving skill, see how you're going to navigate this, right? There is no playbook by which you kind of work every day, or progress every day. But what I am very happy and proud to see that this industry now is providing formal and structural knowledge, formal and structural learning to the generation, to the people coming. When we see hires also coming in, when we want to recruit people, they do have a 101 basis of freight forwarding, of airline management, of capacity control. They know what a pallet is. I did not know what a pallet was when I did business, right? So I'm really happy and proud to see that effort being taken in the industry. But when it comes to having the next generation joining, man, to be honest, it's you have to take a deep breath in every morning you start, right? And the competitiveness, the entry barriers of this industry are just lowering day by day. So it's so difficult to keep up with the changes. Like you said, with the blink of an eye, something changes, and you have to adapt to that constantly. Be it technology, be it data, be it the guys right at the end of the supply chain, your shippers, the signees, any movement on their side affects me. So it's really difficult to keep up, and I feel the generation like the Gen Z is definitely
Yeah.
faster than us, is definitely more agile, um, uh, and I may be underestimating them, which every generation often ends up doing. But I would really want something structural to go towards a path of reaching logistics and air cargo. When I was a child, I never told my father, "Hey, Dad, I want to become an air cargo manager when I grow up." No, never. and And because I don't think I had the tools to do that. But the next generation does have the tools, and I won't be surprised if this kind of adrenaline also gives them the rush to be a part of it for as many years that they want to be.
Well, yeah, sure. You were talking about how this gives you the dopamine and the happy hormone, and I read it in some, like I saw it in some podcast that in your late 20s and 30s, the dopamine, actually the things that give you the happy hormone changes. So I
Hmm.
think it's actually getting up every day and going out there facing new challenges that actually gives you the happy hormone later in life. So well, we
Absolutely.
hope this is so
Absolutely.
I hope many more people come and join the industry.
I mean, I would never think that Excel sheets would give me happy hormones, but they really do now.
Yeah.
So it has evolved
Yeah,
over
because I think they come with the new challenges every day.
time. Exactly.
So, it was very heartening to hear your story, Kritika. And with this, we are hoping that more, women feel encouraged to come into this so-called male-dominant sector. So now, keeping the lighter stuff a little bit aside, we're not going to keep it completely away, but just a little bit aside, I would now like to get to the serious stuff. And I would also request our audiences to please feel free and drop in as many as your queries or questions or observations, and we'll try and get answers to those from Kritika towards the end of this session. So, shall we begin?
Yes.
Okay, so Kritika, as you mentioned, that Allied Aviation, is a family-owned business, and it has been in the GSA business for quite some time now. You must have seen a very close purview of it, which is very clear from your story that you have. So, how would you, describe the organization has transformed over the years?
So, well, the landscape of a GSA, of being a GSA, there have been some constants. We've been in this business for the last 30 years. So, the constants that both my father and I can still relate to, having a 40-year age gap, we still relate to the constants of the risk factors involved in being a GSA, because you invest in manpower, you invest sometimes in technology, you invest in infrastructure for the airline. And once the airline leaves you, that kind of investment goes null. So kind of making sure that that investment is churned well. While the airline is there, and when the airline is not there, it needs to be used by another airline or any other kind of business, right? So that factor, the risk factor, remains constant. Keeping the airlines for a longer time remains constant. The dynamism remains constant. The longevity remains constant. These are challenges that we face from day one, since the inception of the business in 1993. What has transformed over the years is the value added services that you provide to an airline. So what we at Allied have been doing for the last decade is we've grown horizontally as opposed to vertically, right? So when I say horizontally, we've added services like ground handling and supervision. We're one of the only few companies in the country that provide this kind of service to airlines, where we have access that is certified by the Bureau of Civil Aviation to go under the RAN, supervise the ground handling agents that are loading the pallets to ensure there is no revenue leakage and there is optimum utilization of the pallet. So we do these kind of supervision activities for the airlines right under the wing. We have also expanded our door-to-door services, our express services, airport-to-door services through our express unit. We've taken a deep dive at technology, but technology for courier consolidators to expand their courier business in smaller cities and in metro cities, to also give a greater customer experience to the people who are providing these courier services, right? So it kind of stems into e-commerce, courier consolidation, and providing that tech to them. We have also put our foot in the door with pharma. We are the operational agents for Enviatainer in India, where we help We help Enviatina set up leasing stations in India. I'm proud to say that we have helped Enviatina set up Mumbai as one of their first India stations, and we've expanded to 3 other cities in India. So the container movement of Enviatina has become extremely easy in India, and we've partnered with them for this. So these are value-added services that we are providing to the principal airline. And if you do not have this edge, you do not have this USP, you would not. You would be just another run-of-the-mill GSA, which is something that airlines are not looking for. Because no matter how thin the margins get, the service is still the king. And we need to ensure that the service given to the airline and to the freight forwarders as the extended arm of the airline is of prime importance, is of a good value, and can be sustained. So I feel the transformation of the GSA has been a lot more wholesome over the years, and based on how the airline operates, we kind of are agile enough to provide these services.
Kritika, while speaking about allied aviation, I'm sure, you've also covered how GSAs have evolved and, helped me also get a better understanding of how the business has actually evolved. Now, I think what we would also like to know is what importance does it hold, for the industry, and especially considering it from an Indian point of view, because India is also evolving as the industries are. So how is it, gaining more importance in that perspective, and in general, what importance does a GSA holds in the industry?
Well, as the extended arm of the airlines are transforming. The requirements of the airlines from governmental units is getting stronger. Compliances are getting stronger. So the growth of the airlines, the progression of the airlines is what we as GSAs need to adapt to. It is important because if you do not adapt to it, you will perish. As business development, I know how difficult it is to convert contracts with airlines, right? And to make sure that we continue that kind of service throughout the years. So if you do not adapt to say for instance tech marketplaces, right? The marketplaces that have come, like the freighters and the web cargos that have come, you need to adapt to these kind of changes. There were a lot of conversations in the middle when AI, the bubble of AI had come in. Will GSAs be replaced by technology and stuff like that? But since the get-go, what I always feel is that it is important to have a GSA, especially in a market like India, is because of the relationship and the local knowledge. India is an extremely fragmented market. The commodities that you get in the north versus the commodities in the south and the west and the east are completely different. And the relationships that you have with agents on a local level directly lead to how much you're providing for the airline as well. So that chain and that sequence is very important. And if you haven't adapted to how the freight forwarders are working and how the airlines are working, you're of no use then.
Well, you've put it very well. And I'm sure we've all understood the importance of GSAs and how there's a need, for everyone to evolve and take a step ahead, and move ahead as the industry goes and as demand changes from the industry and from the customers. Kritika, GSA, there's a very important part of GSA, which is, revenue optimization or pallet optimization, which can actually help airlines gain a competitive edge. So, how does data play a huge part of supporting this process?
So let's talk a little bit about what do you mean by revenue optimization? What is pallet optimization, right? As a core function of the GSA, knowing what pallet optimization is extremely important. Space is highly perishable. And I use the word perishable extremely carefully, is because if you do not know how to load a pallet, based on the cargo that is available in the market. And if you do not know how to load it properly, or the information has not gone properly from your team to the load master, that space is gone underutilized. And when the space goes underutilized and the flight is gone, the space perishes. If you cannot use that space, it's a revenue leakage for you and for the airline. So that weight volume balance is extremely important in pallet optimization. Like for instance, if a low deck pallet, right? A low deck pallet is 1,600 kilos. If you load 1,200 kilos on that, that's a volumetric cargo. If you load 2,000 kilos on that, that's dense cargo. The optimum weight is 1:1 cargo. That is the 1,600 kilos. So how do you ensure you get the right commodity, the right balance to strike the 1,600 kilos? That is what I mean by pallet optimization. When it comes to overall flight optimizations, what airlines often do is that there are some airlines where there are some routes that are extremely lucrative for the airline, right? They're very high yielding routes, high revenue routes. So they open up that route, say 20 days prior. And when they open that route up 20 days prior, they let the network know, hey, listen, we've opened this up. The current rate is, say, $1, right? If you will be able to get that perfect optimization of the pallet and that kind of commodity within $1, you block space. Now, once the date of that flight gets closer, they close this flight up. Then there is, say, out of 10 tons, say there's only 2 tons left. They sell it at a higher value. So mechanisms like that help in overall flight utilization, flight revenue optimization. How does data help in all of this? Is that it is imperative for you to have a data mining tool to optimize this, is because of the products, the commodities, the trade lanes, the shipper agent combination. These are very important factors for you to know on a local level in order for you to source the right cargo to optimize the pallet, leading to an overall flight optimization. So it's a very hand-in-hand thing.
Yeah. So, now that we've, actually touched upon the part where, data has in the industry, I would now like to, go upon the next question, which is, really more about the spot rates and the challenges of managing spot rates. There was an analysis done which indicates that general air freight spot rates registered largest year-on-year decline of 35%. However, the overall average cost remained 75% above the pre-COVID level, which kind of indicated a glass half full. So, if you could shed a little light on how this impacts the overall aviation market and what is exactly the reason behind this.
Okay, so the statistics in the COVID level, I'm going to keep that aside because that's something that was very unprecedented to the aviation industry. That was something that was out of the ordinary, not something that we're used to. So our plan of action in those 2 years, due to the massive imbalance, was something that was one-off, I would like to say. Let's look at the pre-COVID rates and the rates now and the imbalance between demand and supply then, right? If you want to compare a year-on-year imbalance, I'm given to understand that there was a year-on-year imbalance of demand from December 2022 to December 23, a minus 13% demand imbalance, right? So demand completely went down. While a year-on-year analysis says that the supply went up by 9%. December 2022 to December 2023. So we're already in that phase of imbalance, but it's not as stark as what it was in the COVID periods. The reason for this kind of imbalance right now is inflation. Exporters have a great inventory going on right now, so they do not want to pile up their inventory. There is a slowdown in a lot of factories. While I do believe that the inflation rate is going to calm down, so does the IMF suggest so. I feel in these situations where there is an imbalance, often spot rates play a very important role in order for you to kind of back the business for your own benefit, to utilize the capacity that you have. So aggressive spot rates were there when COVID was there, of course, because of the imbalance. Now we still see a role of aggressive spot rates because of the imbalance. While studies show that most of the trade lanes are extremely balanced in terms of sufficient capacity and sufficient demand, there are a lot of trade lanes that are not being utilized completely. That is when spot rates come into the picture. Now, the thing with spot rates is that it is very important for GSAs and airlines to use spot rates with a lot of integrity. When I say integrity, it is very important for you to understand what the market is doing. Where is the market at? Keep your ear to the ground in the information that you have of what the market is currently doing, and provide spot rates accordingly. Because if it is not used with integrity and it is not used judicially, you can be one of the players that can swing the market towards a lower end, which is not beneficial for all parties and the entire supply chain in that area. A uniform approach towards spot rate in the market is very important. And if that is not done, that again swings the market to the low. What happens with spot rates is that shippers are normally very aware about these kind of spot rates that are in the market. So for bigger shipments, they float a query out, give it to a multiple agents, and play the game of spot rates. Sometimes airlines know how to swing it their way by being very mindful of the players and the freight forwarders that have been supporting them on a contractual basis. But there have been times where because the imbalance of demand and capacity is so much, people are desperate to kind of fill their space up. So we have been through most of these situations, but currently, as of now, as we speak in January, Feb, I don't think there was a non-judiciary use of spot rates. Capacity has been sufficient. Market rates on a global level have dipped. Airlines have been mindful of not demanding high rates. And I think as a unit, and from whoever I speak to also now, I feel that later in 2023, the market is going to perform better, where we will see the nature of spot rates kind of decline.
So you've talked about spot rates, and you also mentioned how there's a game played, between the shippers and the airlines when it comes to spot rates, because everyone wants, their means of transport to be utilized, their business to be utilized by the customers, and there's always been this, I guess, a competition whether to use shipping or airline as the preferred mode of transportation. So this was just a one big challenge that you mentioned. Are there any other challenges in management of spot rates from the airline's perspective?
Challenges in terms of management, you see, I feel like in this question, let's zoom out a little bit, right? When we look at the full supply chain, going back to my answer of why are spot rates used aggressively? So the shipper, the agent, the airline, and the consignee. When you zoom in down to the airline, you will see that yes, the airlines are the guys dictating the spot rates. But when you zoom out from the supply chain, you will see that the overall chain is an overall ecosystem of how the global economy is working. And based on the workings of the global economy is what the shipper is demanding, is what the agent demands, and then what the airline demands. And then it goes to the consignee. So the game is not being played by the airline. I feel the spot rates are dictated because of the global economy and the nature and the dynamism of it.
Okay, I think that really, puts the picture together. and gives better understanding of how sports rates are actually determined and how the industry goes about it. So now coming to the next question, which is also around spot rates. The fall in spot rates is often a reflection of supply demand imbalance in the industry, as you said in your answer. So in November last year, overcapacity was a popping issue for the sector after a much damped demand. So how do you see the industry, battling this imbalance, and how do they continue to offer reliable service to the airlines?
No matter how much you pay, even if the US, from India to US, we're charging, say, $12, or even say $1 or $2, what the prices are going. No matter what the spectrum of the rate is, the service is what has to be uncompromised. Even if the margins are extremely thin, even if there has been a huge imbalance of demand and supply, customers do not. It's in their innate. It's in all our innate behavior to demand the best service, because we are paying a price, and the price can be anything in the spectrum. So even if it is spot rates or long-term rates or any kind of rates, service is something that needs to be there. Yes, there are products that require different level of rates. There are services, overnight services, express services, onboard courier services. These services demand a certain kind of rate. But in terms of a global level, the rates are relatively on a balance, with demand and supply, keeping the whole chain in mind. Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Uh, yeah, just yeah. So how can we break free from these limitations? Yeah, just give me a minute.
No breaking
So
free.
there's a yeah, a little bit confusion. Yeah. So you talked about battling this imbalance and continuing to offer a reliable service.
Yeah.
You've
So
already talked about how it is important to give in the reliable service, irrespective of the price you ask. But how is the industry battling this imbalance?
Well, see, battling this imbalance is a constant. It's a constant thing, right? The load factors have declined. The imbalance is there, but the service cannot be compromised at all. So I mean, balancing. I think this is the core function of our job, battling the imbalance and making sure we optimize it given whatever variable is out there, whatever environment or situation is out there. So I think it's really hard for me to put into words how we do it, because there are so many variables that require you to fight this imbalance, and it's so relative per trade lane, per commodity. Like pharma always has a higher rate. Dense has a different rate. Volume has a different rate. Perishables have a different rate. Overnight couriers have a different rate. So it's such a vast an umbrella that tackling it requires a much more focused view, I feel. I don't know. Did that answer that question?
Yeah, you actually did. So it's more about keeping an eye on the market and actually just going as the situation demands
Yeah.
and trying and keeping up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
if I'm not wrong, that's what you meant to answer. I think that is an amazing answer. So the next thing is the airlines. There are very selected airlines that are actually dictating these market pricings in the industry. which can be a limitation to the current dynamic pricing. So, what are some of the other limitations towards these pricings? And also, how can one offer a dynamic pricing beneficial for different customers?
Providing pricing that is beneficial for customers. It's like I said, let's go back to the chain, right? When we go back to the chain of the airlines, the freight forwarders, shippers, and consignees, um, the airlines are not unreasonable organizations. We're representing 12 airlines right now, and the nature of their demands has been extremely constant and has been extremely predictable given the global scenarios that are going on. Right, so we've never had airlines asking us for extremely high rates when the market is not capable of offering that. So the airlines are extremely mindful of what they want, because there's also a huge heap of data that is supporting all of this, right? You have Seabury, you have IATA CAS, you have a lot of these data that are giving you a very clear picture of what's happening on the ground. GSAs on the other side also provide you what the current levels are in these trade lanes. So the pricing again is dictated by global factors. I go back to that. It's dictated by local level factors. It's dictated by demand and supply, and keeping all that in mind, a reliable service. Right now, the reliable service is something that we make sure with our customer service. The airline provides that to our customers, and then hence we provide it to our customers. So the chain is pretty transparent. Um, the nature of pricing for each commodity again is dictated by the local level, and the dynamic pricing goes back to the answer of spot rates, where when you have insufficient space, it is very important for you to swing the business your way to ensure the capacity has been optimized or been taken care of. When that happens, the imbalance of revenue happens because the spot rates normally go at a lesser rate. Having said that, the spot rates and the dynamic pricing continue till this, I'm assuming till 23 April, May. But given the inflation, given the equalization of the market, the dynamic rates, the pricing will all calm down. It will not completely vanish. It never will. It will calm down, and long-term rates, contractual rates, will now come into effect in the later half of 2023.
This has brought us to my officially last question, after which we'll be taking questions from our audiences. So, my last question to you is, globally, cost-effective GSAs were found to establish an airline's market presence through wide network coverage and good local knowledge, leading to an expansion of airlines' operating networks and generating greater sales revenue. So, does this observation holds true for the Indian market as well?
Not yet, but eventually, yes. Now, why I say that is we are at this stage capable of providing a certain set of information, a certain kind of data to the airline. Now, the airline's network is vast. We're a speck on their network, right? India is a speck on their network, an important part, but a speck. When we see a market rise, when we see a market having a certain potential, we let the airline know. It is the airline's purview. It is the airline's decision to see if all factors that require an airline to come together. So when an airline decides to fly in a particular market, it's just not a dream that they had. The amount of permutations and combinations required to get that perfect synergy is unparalleled, right? So if I tell an airline, hey, listen, I see Ahmedabad as a very important market. Why don't you look into that? It is very important for them to see if there is a good passenger revenue coming out of it, if there is the aircraft that they want to land, can the runway take care of it? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the equipments to take care of that kind of cargo that we're planning on putting in that comes in from the territory of Gujarat? Will DGCA give the permissions based on the government policies and the relations that they have with the country? So there are so many factors that equate to an airline flying in the market that we, as the extended arm of the GSA, can only suggest. Now, I said yes and no both is because those were factors that, and these are still factors that dictate our working. But with the rise of Indian carriers, with this massive order that Air India has placed with Boeing and Airbus, the growth of the Indian Airlines is going to be extremely, it's going to be extremely vast, quick, and it's really going to blow up in the next few years. So international airlines that kind of had a monopoly on certain trade lanes will have to re-look and re-engineer on those routes again, especially the long-haul routes. We already see a lot of long-haul airlines kind of contracting back and retracting back because of the lack of revenue that they're making on that lane. So I feel the Indian carriers are going to go through a boom. The Indian aviation industry is going to go through the boom. If we thought COVID was the best, I really think the best is yet to come for us. The growth of the Indian Airlines, the growth of our manufacturing capability, our export capability is still yet to be shown to the world. So the parallel nature of our economy's success and our aviation sector success is hand in hand, and it's only going to grow moving forward. And we GSAs, knowing the local market, having an infrastructure pan-India, having a manpower well equipped to have its ear to the ground and know what's happening, I think these are in plus the value-added services that we're giving to the airline. I think it ties it all up together that even though my father has seen some great years in the GSA business, I feel my brother and I are yet to see a massive growth that is upcoming in the coming years.
Well, we do hope the industry grows many folds. So, I can see a question here from the audiences. They're asking, experts say that India needs more homegrown air cargo fleet instead of depending on overseas air carriers, creating a desi supply. So will domestic fleet help combat price volatility, especially in black swan events? You just spoke a little about it. Maybe get more into details of how homegrown air cargo fleets can help us, grow.
2 years ago, if you had asked me this question, I would have been like, oh, yes, absolutely. The aviation industry needs to do more about it. But that was 3 years ago. Now, with the pandemic and how airlines have matured in their cargo workings, and they've gotten really sophisticated in cargo. See Pradhan Airlines, right? It's an Indian freighter carrier that is doing runs into the Far East. And you have Indigo with its 320 freighters and its long-haul freighters coming in. Air India, I mean, it's all over the news, and there is no way that globally we will not have India will not have a route unexplored given the massive fleet of Air India that is coming in. I'm very proud also and very happy to see that airlines are investing in also short haul and long haul aircrafts that cater to a larger global network. while we also see so many carriers coming in, I feel the Indian government has also seen, I see the Indian government has also been mindful of how they are approaching foreign carriers. So the domestic carriers are being given some kind of leverages over foreign carriers. Now it'll be interesting to see how with the Apple traffic in South India. It'll be interesting to see how that share is being taken care of and distributed to the world. I genuinely feel a lot of it will be leveraged to Indian carriers. Um, it will not it will not curtail the volatility, the capacity that's coming in, the strength of Indian freighters and Indian cargo carriers coming in won't curtail the volatility, but definitely it will be able to manage the dynamism of the pricing very well internally. So that is something that I am very positive about. As opposed to a whole host of capacity coming in and ruining pricing for different trade lanes, I feel the fact that Indian carriers will have the majority share of trade lanes, it will be easier to navigate through the rate structure as opposed to keeping up with the extreme volatility.
Kritika, you've put it really well here. I can see another question from one of our audiences. They're asking how do services like multimodal transportation, like sea, air to sea, or land air, affect the pricing dynamics in the current market situation, where prices are already very uncertain and volatile? And what role do freight forwarders play in offering such an out of the box and unique offering?
So that's a really interesting question. Multimodal, sea to air to sea. It's a really new concept. To be honest, I came to know about this concept 2 years ago. Very fascinated with this concept, right? Um, uh, these concepts work really well in niche markets. So if you want to send something to Oganadugu in Africa, these are the concept of air sea play a very important role because of the lack of infrastructure in certain places at origin or destination, and because of the pricing. Now, if to these niche markets, the pricing of only air is extremely high. So a combination of air to sea gives a very perfect and a very great solution to the shipper and the consignee, where it's not too expensive, but also the service is extremely reliable. There have been gateways that have mastered the concept of multimodal transportation, and freight forwarders are. I feel this is for freight forwarders who are involved in ocean freight and air freight. This is a beautiful synergy to get the customer a solution. But freight forwarders who are only air or only ocean, I have also seen them struggle in this concept a little bit. This definitely changes the dynamism. It adds to the volatility of it, because the more sophisticated ocean freight gets on a general level, that will affect the prices of the air freight. So we see a lot of garment traffic moving away from air to sea because of the pricing, because of the inventory stockpile issues. We see that commodity moving into ocean, right? But if it is an urgent shipment, the sea to air combination, which gives one portion of revenue to sea and one portion to air, also benefits the overall ecosystem of air freight and air cargo. So I'm very
Um,
positive about it, to be honest. Like I think it's a great concept. I think giving value-added services, innovative concepts to customers is the only way forward.
Well, it indeed is a very innovative and a very unique concept. But Kritika, recently I was attending a conference on multimodal, where a very known expert from the air cargo industry, talked about how, although it is important and the industry actually understands the importance a multimodal transportation holds in the nation, the efforts, particularly from the air cargo industry, are not as much as they would like to be. So if you could comment on that, because coming this from an expert who is from the air cargo industry was unseen and unheard of, because We've often seen people, talk about the efforts they're making. So, do you think the industry is actually making enough efforts towards multimodal transportation?
See, I think when you see it on your balance sheet, when you see the revenue leakage and the revenue loss in the balance sheet, you will have to adapt to change. This concept, even if it won't give you revenue to the whole lane, if you are dictating a certain lane, a certain trade lane, you will have certain revenue. Some revenue is better than nothing. I understand why it is difficult for people to adapt to this, because it's something completely out of their comfort zone. Secondly, I also feel infrastructure might pose a challenge. To be honest, I have personally never handled a C to air shipment. The concept on theory, I'm speaking based on that. How I've understood the concept, how I have seen the chain go. Um, uh, I feel like infrastructure will become an issue, because the transfer of cargo from a port to an airport, that those nitty gritties are very important, and it needs to be extremely seamless. And if you are not an expert in it, or if you've not handled it in the past, or you're just a guy who's doing it for the first time, there will be challenges, there will be a lot of hurdles to pass. But on the long term, in order to provide, in order to capture, in order to make sure you swing this business your way, it is important for you to adapt to these kind of different modes of transportation. In all Karvi, our job is to give a solution to transport a box from point A to B. Like my brother says, we are coolie walas, So that's our job, in the most non-professional and crass way. So if it requires you to do it by sea, if it requires to do it by air, you got to do it. As simple as that.
Well, very uniquely put forth. So, I think I'll take one last question. The question is, how are Indian airlines changing and adapting to the recent developments in the aviation industry, including Tata's takeover of Air India and the emergence of Akasa Air?
How are Indian Airlines
Yeah,
adapting?
changing and adapt.
Competition everywhere. Tough. I can't even imagine. To be honest, I actually want to speak to the other domestic airlines. I want to have a conversation with them, which I haven't. But I can only imagine that this immense competition, the immense pressure on keeping up with the market share, I definitely think they're going to feel it. The increase in passenger traffic this last quarter has been immense. Airlines have really been profitable there. With the influx of the fleet of Air India, with the services and the extremely strategic way of Akasa increasing its network. There is increasing its network, if you notice, very, very slowly, steadily, very mindfully. They've been very strategic about the routes that they are opening up. I really like that approach. It's a really cool approach. While Indigo has like a massive market share of connectivity all over India and also globally now, I feel everyone's going to feel the burn and the heat when Air India comes in. I don't know what Tata is up to be honest. I don't know how they're going to manage all of this. I really think it's going to be a consortium of some sorts where they're going to be only synergies as opposed to competition within the group with Vistara, with Air India. And I also see the synergies happening on a cargo level currently with the domestic carriers. So we have a lot of offline carriers that and for which we use Indian carriers as first leg carriers as touch points to international gateways. So I see these kind of synergies happening within the Tata Group. And I think because of how I feel integrity is a very important part of their culture. I'm not personally scared of how they're going to manage the market, to be honest. But if I was an airline, if I owned an airline, I would be. I really would be. So
Well, we hope they do manage it well and without much, you know. So, Kritika, this is, brought us towards the end of this very, very interesting conversation. And thank you so much for enlightening this conversation with your presence. And, I can see our audiences are very happy. As I went through the comment sections, fetching for the questions, I saw a lot of, people happy about the fact that there's young talent in the industry, considering your hair. And they were happy about the fact that this was a very, very informative conversation. So, all thanks to you. And it's more of a testimony to the fact that this conversation has really highlighted the importance of GSAs and competitive pricing at turbulent time, but at the same time have encouraged women to make a mark in this industry and have encouraged more young talent to be a part of this industry. So thank you so much, Kritika, for that.
thank you, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a great morning talking to you, and it feels great to talk about all of this. So thank you so much for being such a great interviewer as well. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you and to the audience more often.
Yeah, well, it was an absolute delight for us also. So, I would also like to thank our audiences. They've been so great with us. You've always, supported our conversations with our leaders and experts, and always you are also happy to receive such insightful conversations. And this keeps us, Logistics Insider, also very, very motivated to bring to you more such interactions. And of course, it wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for experts like Kritika. So, with this, a very, very heartfelt thank you to all of you. And I will now bid my goodbye as well. And hope you all have a lovely day ahead. Hope you have a lovely, lovely day ahead, Kritika. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.